Don't buy my notebook. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So this is week 4 peaking block, and actually I'm splitting up week 4 peaking block into 2 videos. So one will be about squats and deadlifts, so lower body, and the other one will be about bench. The reason why I'm doing this is because there's a lot of information about both of them that I want to share, and I don't want to like cram them all into one video. And also they're kind of different topics, so it'll be also easier for people to search things up. So during my second 280 deadlift from last week, week 3, I got really bad hip pain on my right hip, and it was like in the middle of my hip. It was kind of weird because it was all spread out. It wasn't like specifically one place, so it was hard to pinpoint what the issue was. But anyway, after that, I rested a day and I did my day 1 usual workout, and I couldn't even squat at all because the pain was so bad. And it was weird because I couldn't be in a sitting position, but I could stand and I could lay down. I couldn't squat on day 1, and that was September 7th. It was just too much hip pain. I warmed up to 205 for a squat single. I was supposed to do 230 for 4 that day, but that 205 hurt a lot, so I didn't squat. I was still able to bench like usual on that day, but that's gonna be in a different video. And then the next day I did deadlifts, so I did 250 singles, and surprisingly it didn't bother my hip at all. So because I can't bend down as much with the pain, I started my hips a little bit higher than usual. Usually I sit down a little bit more, so having my hips a little bit higher means I will be using more hamstrings and lower back. But it was just a tiny change, but that resulted in no hip pain, which is really good. And then on that day I did some dumbbell rows, like one hand on the bench and one hand with the dumbbell, and that kind of irritated my hip because I was a little bit off balanced, so that made my hip even worse. So I was supposed to do my heavy top squat single September 10th, but with all of the pain and that kind of stuff, I decided to move my heavy stuff to next week. I think that was a good decision because I wanted my hip to heal or almost heal before going for bad heavy numbers and maybe injuring my hip even more, which I don't want. So on that day I did 225 single, and usually 225 moves at like an RPE 6 or something, but of course it didn't move that well because I had hip pain. And on that day, hip pain was on both sides instead of just the one side that I injured at first. I think it was just a balance thing, so it was on both sides. I did another 225 single, and I was focusing on my form and my back angle because I low bar. My back is supposed to be more horizontal with the ground instead of standing up straight, which I sometimes forget to implement. It's been a while since I've purely just worked on form because I've been pushing my numbers a lot. I always try to lift with better form, but sometimes I forget about cues, or like I don't think about stuff, and then it just gradually gets worse until I have to like manually bring my form back. So anyway, and I did a 235 single. And then the next day, I didn't do my deadlift top single as I didn't do my squat top single the day before. I just did some deadlift singles, so I did 245, 255, 245. And with these, the same thing with my squats. I focus on my form a lot. Make sure I start my hips a little bit higher because I think that's where my better position is, but I am quad dominant, so that's why I like to put my hips down more so I can use quads. But on conventional deadlift, you're not supposed to use that much quads. And yeah, so those squats and those deadlifts were just lighter stuff that I programmed myself to make sure I'm not over fatiguing myself and making my hip pain worse. And by the time I got to this point, my hip pain was almost gone. It was still there a tiny bit, but it depends on how much I irritated. So that's why I basically took out a bunch of accessories that might irritate it to make sure I drop off the fatigue, like barbell glute thrust and any kind of one-sided rows or that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's what I did. And then the next day I did my top singles. Surprisingly, there was no pain warming up, and I kind of said I didn't get more footage, but I was expecting to go heavier. So I did warm-up singles, 230, 245. Those moved without hip pain at all, and the form was really good too, and I was really happy with those. And then the next warm-up I did was 260. At the bottom of it, I kind of lost control with my hip, probably because my hip isn't that strong right now with all of the pain going on. So I lost control at the bottom, and during that rep I got hip pain. So I was like, like, okay, that's like RP 8.5 or whatever, and I don't want to go any higher to irritate my hip anymore. So that's where I capped it off, and then I did a back off single at 235, which also had hip pain, so I only did one of them. I think those squats had much better form than the squats I did a few days ago, and I'll talk about more about my form and how I'm gonna fix it and that kind of stuff after I go through all my lifts. Also, another reason why I capped it off at just 260 and didn't go higher, I was supposed to try to go up to 280 or 285 like before all this hip pain started. That was the plan, but you know, I can't do that with the pain. But also I didn't want to go up because I had really heavy bench singles that day also, which will not be in this video, it'll be in the next video, but those went really well, so I wanted to save a little bit for that. And then I rested another day before doing deadlifts, and for deadlifts I did 255, 270, and then 285 for a top single at RP 8.5. I did attempt 300 after that, but I couldn't get it because of the pain, that kind of stuff. Also because I'm just not that strong. I was really high in fatigue by that point. So yeah, I ended up with 285, which is really good. 285 is 5 pounds under my max. Also, I still haven't gained up my weight. I'm still around like 129, 130. So taking that into consideration, a 285 deadlift is not bad. So those are my top squat and deadlift singles. After that workout, I've been deloading since to drop off the fatigue, make sure my hip and everything is good before I jump into another block. First of all, I think I've just been slacking off on my form. Not like necessarily not caring about my lifts. I still think about my form a lot, but I don't think of cues that much. There's like so many cues you can think about at the same time, and when you're focusing on just lifting the weight up when it gets heavy, because when it gets heavy, it's hard to think about so many cues and stuff, and for me it's just better to just think to lift it because I practice my form so much that it comes naturally. Of course, my natural form isn't that perfect, but it's not bad. So that's the first thing. I haven't been thinking about cues because I've been lifting heavier, but next vlog I'll be lifting a little bit lighter and thinking about cues and like my form, just focusing on that more and just like fixing my technique up. So second is that for the past few months since high school nationals, I've been growing a lot of muscle, especially on my quads, a little bit on my hamstrings and my glutes. So I've been building a lot of muscle, but there are a few muscle groups that I didn't focus on growing specifically or hasn't grown as much as my quads. So I've been doing a lot of quad extensions 2 times a week. So I'm getting huge quads, but my abductors are really weak. So my abductors were weak like before all this. They're always a weaker muscle of mine. But since my quads have increased in mass and strength by a lot, and so did my hamstrings and my glutes, my abductors seem even more far behind. So that's why I've been getting more knee cave with my squats now. So knee caving is not dangerous. Let me say that first. First of all, I don't stand super wide, so it's impossible for my knee cave to be dangerous because there's like not much space that my knees can go in. Also, I don't get knee cave for all my lifts, just the heavy ones that I show in my videos, like all my warm-ups and that kind of stuff are totally fine. My knees are totally fine. So it's just when I get to heavy weights, that's like the natural response. That's the position my knees want to be in to be the strongest, which is totally fine. So knee caving is not as big as a problem as most people think. I think Steffi has a really good video on knee caving or knee valgus that you guys can check out. But yeah, knee caving is not dangerous. First of all, I just want to say that. But if there is a lot of knee caving, it should be solved or at least looked at. So the reason why I knee cave is because my abductors are weak. Because I grow my other muscles a lot more, my abductors seem more weak. So ever since those top singles, I've been doing more abductor work, so doing some banded lateral walks, abductor machine and that kind of stuff to work on my abductor muscles. And also I've been noticing I have a little bit of knee cave on my deadlifts, and that's because I think I naturally want to stand closer for deadlifts. So when I move my feet in a little, that actually makes me stronger for deadlifts. So that's one thing, changing my foot position for deadlifts. I can't put my feet closer for squats because if I go closer, I get hip pain when I squat. So my stance for squat is really good and it fits me really well. So I'm not gonna change my stance for squats, but I am gonna change my stance for deadlifts and move my feet closer a little bit. Hey, don't buy my notebook. And also I want to say, for anyone who has knee caving, the solution is not to push your knees out. I know it's something that everyone teaches, but that is not good. The reason why is you want to spend all your energy pushing the weight up instead of using your energy like side to side. Since if you're spending energy pushing your knees out, then you're gonna have less energy to spend up, which is where you want the bar to go. And also on the way down on your squats, it's not good to think about knees out as well. It's a cue you can use to practice, but don't actually physically try to push your knees out. That is not the solution to knee caving. Knee caving usually can be fixed by either fixing your stance or working on weak muscles. Those are the two ways to fix knee caving. And it's definitely not pushing your knees out. And that's not natural at all. Like pushing knees out is not natural. But when you watch some people squat, you do see their knees go out at the bottom of a squat. That's because they're opening up their hip, not necessarily pushing their knees out. There's a difference between opening up your hip, which I do on the way down when I squat, but I do not push my knees out. That's not what I think about. I think of opening my hip to open up space for my back to lean down when I do low bar. The best cue to think of is to think of knees tracking on top of your toes, because that should be the most efficient position for your knees, where your knees are on top of your toes. And so think of tracking your knees on top of your toes, and that creates a straight line of energy so you can shoot up instead of wasting your energy going to the sides. And this is not just my opinion. A lot of people, especially the higher level people, never say knees out. That's not something that we do when we're trying to increase our squat number. That's just not efficient. And for powerlifting, all we do is talk about efficiency, because the more efficient you are, the more weights you can lift. When I got hip pain, I got it on one side instead of the other. So the reason why is I've noticed that one quad is much stronger and bigger than the other quad. And the reason being is when I do quad extensions, I do both legs together. And sometimes you will just use your stronger leg to do most of the work and just let your weaker leg follow along, which is not good. So now I've changed quad extensions to single leg quad extensions. So just doing one leg at a time. And let me tell you, my left leg is like 3 to 4 reps weaker than my right leg, which is a big problem. So even in my deadlifts, even with my conventional stance, I can feel a slight shift in my hips. And same thing with my squats. There's like a small hip shift where like my hips go one way when I go up. And the reason why that happens is because one quad is stronger. So one side pushes up faster than the other, and that causes my hip to shift and causes more weight and pressure put on one side of my hip, and that side gets hip pain. So usually if you get hip pain on one side and not the other side, it's a balance issue. So that's why it's really important to do single leg movements. So single leg curls, single leg extensions, or single leg RDLs, Bulgarian split squats. But for me, Bulgarian split squats doesn't work that well in telling the difference, because I can use my glutes to balance. So if I'm just weaker, I just use more glutes, and that works out. So it's really important to do single leg isolation movements, like single leg quad extensions. So yeah, that is what I'm doing, and hopefully through that I can make both legs the same strength, so I won't get any hip shift in my squat or my deadlift. So usually hip shift means muscle imbalances. That's the usual answer, unless if your legs are different lengths and that kind of stuff, and then you need to go to like a chiropractor or whatever. But that's not in my realm of knowledge. But anyway, yeah, those are my 2 reasons why I got hip pain. I hope you guys learned something from this video. If you guys have any questions, make sure to leave them down in the comments below. Subscribe and stay tuned for my next video, which is my bench video from the same days. Spoiler, I did hit a PR, which is super exciting. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.